The scrapyard floated in the darkness of space like a graveyard for forgotten dreams. Broken ships, twisted metal, and pieces of technology from 100 different worlds drifted in slow circles around the trading station. Jake pressed his face against the window of his small transport ship and watched the wreckage spin past. Somewhere in all that junk, he hoped to find something worth selling. "This is a waste of fuel," Lisa Grant said from the pilot's seat. She was already running numbers on her screen, calculating how much this trip was costing them. "The good stuff gets picked clean before it even reaches auction. We're going to spend more getting here than we'll make." Jake turned away from the window and smiled at his partner. "You always say that. And I'm always right." She wasn't wrong. Their salvage business barely kept them alive these days. The big corporations had better ships, better scanners, and better connections. Small operations like theirs survived on scraps and luck. But Jake had a feeling about today. He couldn't explain it, but something had pulled him toward this particular auction. The station welcomed them with the usual coldness. The tall, gray-skinned aliens looked down at the two humans with expressions of mild disgust. Humans were still newcomers to the galactic community. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, and most species treated them like children who had wandered into an adult conversation. The auction hall was crowded with buyers from a dozen different worlds. Jake recognized the with their 4 arms and hard shells. He saw the elegant and thin, floating slightly above the ground on their gravity belts. There were others he didn't know, species from parts of the galaxy humans hadn't explored yet. The auctioneer stood on a raised platform, speaking in the common trade language that all species learned. He sold pieces of salvage one by one, bought an old weapons system, purchased navigation equipment. The prices were high, and Jake's hope began to fade. Then the auctioneer pointed toward the back of the yard, where a strange shape sat alone in the darkness. "And now," the auctioneer said with a laugh in his voice, "we come to the dead one." Lights turned on around the object, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. It was a ship, but unlike anything he had ever seen. The hull curved in ways that didn't follow normal design. The metal had a color he couldn't name, somewhere between silver and something that didn't exist in human language. Strange symbols covered every surface, carved deep into the material. "This vessel has sat in our yard for 300 years, the auctioneer continued. "Before that, it sat in a museum for another 300. No one knows where it came from or who built it. No power source works with it. No computer can communicate with it. It is, for all purposes, dead." The crowd laughed. The made sounds of amusement. They shook their heads with pity at whoever might be foolish enough to want such a thing. "We will start the bidding at 1 credit, the auctioneer said, "simply to remove it from our inventory." Jake raised his hand. Lisa grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" "Buying that ship." "Jake, it's worthless. You heard him. 600 years and nobody could make it work." "1 credit to the human," the auctioneer said, sounding surprised. "Does anyone else wish to bid?" Silence filled the hall. The aliens looked at Jake with expressions ranging from confusion to amusement. Why would anyone want a piece of junk that didn't work? "Sold," the auctioneer said, "to the human for 1 credit." Lisa was furious during the entire flight back to the scrapyard where they kept their purchases. The dead ship followed behind them, pulled by a tow cable. It was larger than Jake had realized, nearly 3 times the size of their own transport. "1 credit," Lisa muttered. "We spent 1 credit on a giant paperweight. How are we going to move it? How are we going to store it? What were you thinking?" Jake watched the ship through the rear camera. There was something about it, something familiar that he couldn't quite place. "Look at the control surfaces," he said. "What?" "On the outside of the ship. See those panels near the front? Those aren't sensors, they're access hatches, manual access hatches." Lisa glanced at the screen. So why would an advanced alien species need manual hatches? Everything in the galaxy runs on automation. They use neural links. They use telepathic commands. Nobody uses their hands anymore. Humans do, Lisa said slowly. Exactly. They reached their dock 3 days later. The station was small and old, a leftover from the early days of human expansion. Jake and Lisa had bought it cheap and turned it into their base of operations. It wasn't much, but it was home. Getting the alien ship into the main bay took most of the day. It barely fit through the doors, and Jake had to guide it manually using their old crane system. When it finally settled onto the floor, he stood before it and felt something he couldn't explain. The ship seemed to be waiting. Well, Lisa said, standing beside him. There it is, your one-credit treasure, now what? Jake walked toward the hull and placed his hand against the strange metal. It was warm. Not hot, but warm, like something alive. He pulled his hand back in surprise. Did you feel that? He asked. Feel what? He touched the ship again. The warmth was still there, gentle and steady. The metal seemed to vibrate under his fingertips, so slight that he might have imagined it. It's not dead, Jake said quietly. It's sleeping. Lisa crossed her arms. Ships don't sleep. This one does. He walked along the hull, running his hand across the surface. The symbols carved into the metal were deep and precise, each one perfect in its design. Jake didn't understand their meaning, but he understood their purpose. They weren't decoration. They were instructions. Near the center of the ship, he found what he was looking for. A hatch, just like the ones he had spotted from the auction. It had no electronic lock, no scanner, no computer interface. Instead, it had a simple handle designed to be gripped and turned by a physical hand. Jake wrapped his fingers around the handle. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for a human grip. He turned it, and the hatch opened with a soft hiss of ancient air. Inside, darkness waited. But somewhere in that darkness, Jake could see a faint glow, like a spark that had been waiting 600 years for someone to notice. He looked back at Lisa, who was staring at him with wide eyes. I think, Jake said, that we just found something worth a lot more than one credit. And then he stepped inside. 3 weeks passed and Jake barely left the alien ship. He ate inside it. He slept inside it. He studied every corridor, every room, every surface until his eyes burned from exhaustion. Lisa brought him food and coffee and worried looks, but she had stopped trying to pull him away. She had seen the glow too, and she knew something important was happening. The inside of the ship was beautiful in a way Jake had never experienced. The walls curved like the inside of a seashell. The floors were smooth but never slippery. Every corner held something new, some device or panel or structure that is understanding. But through it all, one thing remained constant. Nothing worked. The ship was alive, he could feel it, but it refused to wake up. Danny Reeves arrived on a Tuesday. He was young, barely 22, with messy brown hair and grease stains on his clothes that never seemed to wash out. Jake had hired him 2 years ago as an apprentice, and the kid had proven himself to be a natural with machines. If anyone could help figure out this ship, it was Danny. So this is it, Danny said, standing in the main corridor with his mouth hanging open. This is the ship everyone is talking about. Everyone is talking about it, Lisa asked. Word spreads fast. A human bought a dead architect ship for 1 credit. They are furious. They think it's hilarious. Some scholar wrote a whole article about human foolishness. Jake emerged from a side room, his face tired but his eyes bright. They called it an architect ship. That's the rumor. Nobody knows for sure, but the design matches some old ruins that explorers have found across the galaxy. Ancient stuff. Really ancient. Like before any current species existed, kind of ancient. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The architects were legends. Stories told by spacers around flickering lights. They were supposed to have built the first hyperspace routes, the paths that all ships now use to travel between stars. But they had vanished millions of years ago, leaving nothing behind but ruins and mysteries. "If this is really an architect's ship," Lisa said slowly, "then it's worth more than we could ever imagine." "If we can make it work," Jake replied. "And so far nothing I've tried has done anything." Danny walked to the nearest wall and studied it carefully. His fingers traced the carved symbols, following their patterns with the focus of someone who saw machines the way artists saw colors. "The power core," he said. "Have you found it?" "Center of the ship, big room. There's something in there that might be a core, but it won't respond to anything. I've tried electrical charges, radiation pulses, everything I could think of." "Show me." They walked through the silent corridors until they reached the heart of the vessel. The room was circular, and in its center stood a pillar of the same strange metal that made up the hull. It rose from the floor and stretched toward the ceiling, covered in more symbols than anywhere else on the ship. At its base, Jake had placed a collection of failed experiments. Cables, batteries, generators, all useless. Danny circled the pillar slowly. He touched it here and there, pressing his palms flat against the surface. Then he stopped and looked at Jake with a strange expression. "It's not dead," he said. "It's waiting." "Waiting for what?" "Permission." Danny pointed at a series of small protrusions along the base of the pillar. Jake had noticed them before but assumed they were decorative. Now, looking closer, he saw what Danny meant. They were switches. Physical, mechanical switches, each one slightly different in shape and size. "The tried to activate this ship with telepathy," Danny said. "The probably tried neural links. The used their standard computer interfaces. But look at these. These aren't designed for any of that. These are designed for hands, for fingers, for someone who actually touches things." Jake knelt beside the pillar and studied the switches. There were 12 of them, arranged in a pattern that seemed random at first but slowly began to make sense. It was like a combination lock, but one that required physical manipulation rather than codes or signals. "Humans," Lisa whispered. "We're one of the only species that still uses manual controls." "Because we're primitive," Jake said with a bitter laugh. "Or because we never forgot," Danny replied. "The architects built this ship millions of years ago. Maybe back then everyone used their hands, but as species evolved, they moved beyond physical interaction. They became dependent on technology to do everything for them, except us. We're still new to the galaxy. We still build things with our own hands." Jake took a deep breath. He looked at the switches and tried to clear his mind. He didn't know the right combination, but something inside him suggested that knowing wasn't the point. Feeling was. He touched the first switch and pressed it gently. A soft click echoed through the room. He moved to the second, then the third. Each one felt slightly different under his fingers, and each one seemed to guide him toward the next. It was like playing a musical instrument he had never seen before but somehow understood. When he pressed the 12th switch, the ship changed. Light exploded from the pillar, not harsh but warm, filling the room with a golden glow. The walls began to pulse with energy, and the symbols carved into them started to move, flowing like water across the metal surfaces. A deep hum rose from somewhere far below, a sound that Jake felt in his bones rather than heard with his ears. "It's working," Lisa said, her voice filled with wonder. The ship was waking up. Jake could feel it stretching, like a creature emerging from a long sleep. Systems that had been silent for 600 years began to activate one by one. Lights appeared in the corridors. Air began to circulate. The warmth that Jake had felt in the hull spread through every part of the vessel. And then a voice spoke. "Builder recognized. Awakening sequence complete. I am Vigil. I have been waiting for you." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was calm and ancient, carrying the weight of countless years. "What are you?" Jake asked. "I am the guardian of this vessel. I was created to serve the builders, those who shape reality with their hands. You are the first builder I have encountered in 647 years." "I'm not a builder, I'm just a human. The terms are the same. Your species still carries the gift that others have forgotten. You still create, you still touch, you still build. Jake stood in the center of the glowing room, surrounded by technology beyond his understanding, and realized that everything had just changed. Not just for him, but for humanity. At that moment, another ship dropped out of hyperspace near the station. Lisa ran to check the sensors and returned with a worried expression. "We have a visitor, military-class vessel, human, but I don't recognize the registration." Before Jake could respond, a signal came through. A woman's voice, sharp and commanding. "This is Karen Price, formerly of Earth Defense Intelligence. I know what you found and I'm coming aboard. We need to talk before someone else arrives who won't be as friendly." Jake looked at the glowing pillar, at the ship that had slept for centuries waiting for the right hands to wake it, and knew that his simple life as a salvager was over. Something much bigger had begun. Karen Price was not what Jake expected. She was older, maybe 50, with gray streaking her dark hair and scars on her hands that told stories she probably never shared. She walked through the alien ship with the careful steps of someone who had seen dangerous things and learned to respect them. Her eyes missed nothing. "I spent 15 years studying architect ruins," she said as they walked through the glowing corridors. "Broken stations, collapsed tunnels, fragments of technology that nobody could understand, but never a working ship, never anything alive." "Vigil," Jake said, and the air seemed to shift around them in response to the name. "Tell her what you told me." The ancient voice filled the corridor. The architects were the first, before the rose from their ocean world, before the learned to bend gravity, before any species you know existed, the architects traveled the stars. They built the hyperspace routes that all civilizations now use. They created wonders that modern science cannot explain. "What happened to them?" Lisa asked. "They transcended. They moved beyond physical form, beyond the need for bodies or ships or technology. But before they left, they prepared gifts for those who would come after. This vessel is one such gift." Karen stopped walking and turned to face the nearest wall. Her fingers traced the flowing symbols with something like reverence. "The ruins I studied, they were tests. We found that much. The architects left challenges for species to solve, puzzles that required certain abilities to complete. And nobody could solve them," Danny said. "Exactly. They tried for thousands of years. They sent their best engineers. Nothing worked. The technology just sat there, dead and silent, like it was waiting for something that never came." "It was waiting for us," Jake said quietly, "for humans." Vigil spoke again. "The architects understood something that most species forget as they evolve. Creation requires connection. True building requires touch. As civilizations advance, they remove themselves from direct interaction with their world. They automate. They delegate. They forget how to feel the material beneath their fingers." "But humans never reach that point," Karen said. "We're too young. We still fix our own machines. We still work with our hands." "You still build," Vigil confirmed. "And because of this, you can access what others cannot." Jake thought about all the times he had been looked down upon by other species. The who laughed at human tools. The who human clumsiness. Every species treated humans like backwards children who hadn't figured out how to use computers properly. And all along, that very thing they mocked was the key to power beyond imagination. "Show us," Jake said. "Show us what this ship can do." Vigil led them deeper into the vessel, to rooms they hadn't explored yet. The first was a repair bay, filled with mechanical arms that hung from the ceiling like sleeping spiders. As Jake entered, the arms activated, moving with smooth precision. "Self-repair systems," Vigil explained. "This vessel can heal any damage to its structure, given sufficient energy and materials. It cannot be destroyed by conventional weapons." The next room held weapons. Not guns or missiles, but something far stranger. Crystal formations floated in the air, pulsing with contained energy. Space-fold weaponry. These devices create temporary tears in the fabric of reality, moving matter from one location to another instantaneously. An enemy ship's core could be removed and placed in the void of space before they understood what happened. Lisa stared at the crystals with wide eyes. That's not a weapon, that's magic. It is science developed over millions of years. Science that requires a physical operator to function. The crystals must be touched. They must be guided by hands that understand creation. The final room was the bridge. It was smaller than Jake expected, designed for a crew of perhaps 4 or 5. Control panels surrounded a central chair, and every surface was covered with physical interfaces. Buttons, switches, levers, dials. Nothing digital, nothing automated. The engines of this vessel do not obey conventional physics, Vigil said. They move through dimensions that your scientists have not yet discovered. In practical terms, this means that distances which would take years to cross can be traveled in moments. Jake sat in the central chair. It adjusted to his body perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for him. His hands found the controls naturally, fingers resting on switches that felt like extensions of his own body. "This is incredible," Danny whispered. "Jake, do you understand what this means? With this ship, humanity could become a real power in the galaxy." Karen's expression darkened. "That's exactly what worries me." Everyone turned to look at her. "I didn't come here just to marvel at architect technology," she said. "I came because I've been monitoring communications across the sector. Word about this ship is spreading fast. The Empire has already sent inquiries to asking for information about the buyer. The Confederation is calling emergency meetings. Everyone thought this ship was worthless. Now they're realizing they were wrong." "They can't take it," Jake said. "I bought it legally." "Legal doesn't matter when enough weapons are pointed at you. They will claim salvage rights. They will argue that architect technology is too dangerous for any single species to control. They'll find excuses, and they'll come with fleets to back them up." The ship hummed around them, as if responding to the threat. Jake felt something through his connection to the chair, a sense of readiness, of power waiting to be unleashed. "Vigil," he said, "are there other ships like this one?" "Yes, this vessel is one of many. The architects created a fleet before their transcendence, hidden across the galaxy in locations known only to their systems. They are waiting, as I waited, for builders to awaken them." "How many?" 347 vessels remain operational. They sleep in a shipyard at coordinates I can provide. Karen's face went pale. 300 ships like this one. "No, many are larger. Many are more powerful. This vessel was designed for scouting and exploration. Others were designed for construction, others for defense. Together, they represent the greatest concentration of technology in the known galaxy." Jake stood from the chair. His mind raced with possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. If he told anyone about the fleet, wars would start. Every species in the galaxy would fight to control that kind of power. But if he kept it secret, he would be condemning humanity to face whatever was coming alone. "We need to move," he said. "If the N are already asking questions, they'll be here soon. We have to get this ship somewhere safe while we figure out what to do." Lisa nodded and headed for the door. "I'll prep our transport for escort." Danny followed her. "I'll grab whatever supplies we have." Karen remained, studying Jake with eyes that had seen too much. "You're not going to hand this over to Earth's government, are you?" "Would you?" She was silent for a long moment. "No, I've seen what governments do with power. They hoard it. They use it against each other. They start wars." "Then we agree." "We agree that we don't trust anyone. That's not the same as having a plan." Jake looked around the bridge, at the technology that could change everything, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "The plan is simple," he said. We learn everything we can, we stay alive, and when the time comes, we make sure this power goes to the right people. And who decides who the right people are? Jake didn't have an answer for that, not yet. But as the ship began to power up around him, responding to his hands on the controls, he knew that he would have to find one soon. They named the ship because that was exactly what their situation had become. Jake sat in the pilot's chair as they slipped away from the station, leaving behind everything they had built over the years. Their salvage business, their home, their simple life. All of it gone in the space of a few days. Lisa flew beside them in their old transport ship, refusing to abandon it even though they could have carried them all easily. Danny worked in the engine room, learning the architect's systems with the hunger of a young engineer who had suddenly discovered that everything he knew was just the beginning. Karen sat in the navigation seat, watching the sensors with the focus of someone expecting trouble. Trouble came faster than anyone expected. "Contact," Karen said sharply. 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace. Military signatures. Jake felt the response to his tension, systems activating without conscious command. The ship was reading his emotions, preparing for whatever he needed. "How did they find us so fast?" Danny asked through the internal communication. "They must have had ships waiting nearby," Karen replied. "They don't waste time when they want something." A signal came through and a harsh voice filled the bridge. "Human vessel, this is Commander Sorrel of the Empire. You are in possession of stolen property. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." "Stolen," Jake said to himself. "I bought this ship legally." "They don't care about legal," Karen said. "They respect one thing, strength. If they can take it from you, they believe they deserve to have it." Jake opened a communication channel. "Commander Sorrel, this vessel was purchased at an auction. I have documentation. There has been no theft." The commander's laugh was ugly. "Documentation means nothing. That ship belongs to whoever has the power to hold it. You are one small human in a vessel you do not understand. Surrender now, and I will let your crew live." The 3 warships spread out, forming a triangle around the. They were massive compared to the architect's ship, bristling with weapons and armor. Any one of them could have destroyed a human colony with ease. But Jake felt no fear. The hummed beneath him, and Vigil's voice spoke quietly in his mind. "The vessels are powerful by current standards. They pose no threat to this ship. Do you wish me to demonstrate?" Jake hesitated. Starting a fight with the Empire could mean war for all of humanity, but running wasn't an option either. If he showed weakness now, every other faction would see it. "Show me what we can do," he said, "but don't destroy them, not yet." "Understood." The moved like nothing Jake had ever experienced. One moment they were surrounded by enemy ships, and the next they were behind them, having crossed the distance in a blink. The sensors couldn't track the movement. Their weapons fired at empty space where they had been. "What happened?" Commander Sorrel's voice had lost its confidence. "Where did they go?" Jake brought the directly above the commander's ship, close enough to see the individual plates of armor on the hull. The architect vessel's weapons systems locked on, and every alarm on the bridge must have been screaming. "Commander," Jake said calmly, "I don't want to fight you, but I need you to understand something. This ship is not something you can take. It's not something anyone can take. It chose me. And until you learn to respect that, conversations like this will always end the same way." Silence stretched across the communication channel. Then, slowly, the 3 ships began to pull back. "This is not over, human," Commander Sorrel said. "The Empire does not forget. We will meet again." The warships jumped to hyperspace, leaving them alone in the darkness. Lisa's voice came through from her transport. "What just happened? 1 second you were surrounded and then you were just somewhere else." "Architect engines," Danny said, his voice filled with wonder. "They don't work like ours. They don't move through space. They move space around them." "We need to keep going," Karen said. "They will report this. Soon everyone will know what this ship can do." She was right. They traveled for 3 days, jumping from system to system, avoiding major trade routes in populated worlds. But no matter where they went, trouble followed. Diplomatic cruisers appeared at 2 of their stops, transmitting formal requests for them to submit to inspection. Pirate groups made attempts to intercept them, drawn by rumors of treasure. Even human authorities sent messages, asking questions that Jake wasn't ready to answer. On the 4th day, they stopped to rest in an empty system with no planets, just rocks and dust orbiting a dying star. Everyone gathered on this bridge to discuss their options. "We can't run forever," Lisa said. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from too many hours flying. "Eventually, someone will catch us when we're not expecting it." "The coordinates Vigil gave us," Danny said. "The architect's shipyard. If we can get there, we'll have options." Karen shook her head. "Getting there isn't the problem. The problem is what happens after. If we activate more ships, we're not just individuals anymore. We become a power, and powers attract enemies." Jake stood by the main viewport, staring at the swirling dust outside. His hands rested on the cool metal of the frame, feeling the ship's presence beneath his fingertips. "Vigil," he said, "what did the architects want? Why did they leave all this behind?" The ancient voice filled the bridge. "The architects believed in cycles. They rose, they built, they transcended. They knew that other species would follow the same path, but they also knew that evolution often leads to forgetting. Species that become too advanced lose touch with their foundations. They forget how to create. They become dependent on what already exists." "So they left the ships as a test," Karen said, "to find species that hadn't forgotten." "More than a test, a gift. The architects wanted their legacy to continue through those who still carried the spark of creation. They designed these vessels to be unusable by those who had evolved beyond physical interaction. Only builders could awaken them. Only builders could use them." "And in 600 years," Jake said, "humans are the first builders to come along." "In much longer than 600 years. The ships have waited for millions of years. Species have risen and fallen in that time. Empires have come and gone, but none possessed the gift, until now." Jake turned to face his crew, his friends, the people who had followed him into something none of them fully understood. "The architects didn't just leave ships," he said. "They left a choice. We can use this power to make humanity strong, to protect ourselves, to become what every other species fears." "Or," Lisa asked, "or we can do what the architects did. We can build something, not an empire, not a weapon, something better." Karen stood up, her expression hard. "Pretty words, but the galaxy doesn't care about intentions. They will come with bigger fleets. They will send diplomats backed by warships, and everyone else will fight for scraps. You want to build something, you'll have to survive first." As if in answer to her words, the sensors lit up. More ships were coming, not 3 this time, dozens, and together moving in from opposite directions. "They're coordinating," Danny said, his voice tight. "I've never seen the 2 of them work together before." "They hate each other," Lisa said, "but they hate what we represent even more." Jake sat in the pilot's chair and let his hands find the controls. They responded instantly, systems powering up, weapons coming online. He could feel the ship's eagerness, its readiness for whatever came next. "Then we don't give them what they hate," Jake said. "We give them something they never expected." He engaged the engines, and the shot forward into the darkness, toward the coordinates that Vigil had promised would change everything. Behind them, the combined fleets gave chase. And ahead of them, somewhere in the depths of space, 300 sleeping ships waited for hands to wake them. The dead star system had no name on any map. Its sun had burned out millions of years ago, leaving behind a cold sphere of compressed matter that gave off no light and no heat. Nothing lived here. Nothing had lived here for longer than most species could imagine. It was the perfect hiding place. They emerged from hyperspace, and Jake felt his breath catch as the shipyard came into view. It was massive beyond anything he had prepared for. Hundreds of vessels floated in perfect formation around a central station that dwarfed them all. Each ship glowed with faint internal light, dormant but not dead, waiting. "By everything holy," Karen whispered. Lisa's voice came through from her transport, which had barely kept up during the journey. "Jake, are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it." Danny was already at the sensors, running numbers that didn't make sense by any standard measurement. "Some of these ships are bigger than anything they have, bigger than anything anyone has. That one there on the left, I think it's a construction vessel. It could build a space station in days." "Welcome to the shipyard of the architects," Vigil said. "This is what remains of their fleet. 347 vessels, each one waiting for a builder to give it purpose." Jake guided them toward the central station, a structure of the same strange metal that made up their ship's hull. Docking happened automatically, the station recognizing them as one of its own. The airlock opened, and warm air flowed in, fresh and clean despite millions of years of waiting. "They maintained the station all this time," Karen said, as they walked through corridors that should have been filled with dust and decay. "The automation must be incredible." "Not automation," Vigil corrected. "The station is alive in its own way. It tends to the ships as a gardener tends to plants. It has waited for this moment as long as they have." They reached a control room at the heart of the station. Screens covered every wall, showing images of each ship in the fleet. Jake recognized some designs from but saw dozens of others that were completely new. Warships, carriers, construction vessels, mining ships, everything needed to build a civilization from nothing. "The fleet will respond to any builder who boards a ship and engages its systems," Vigil explained. "Physical interaction is required. Mental commands will not work. Neural links will not work. Only hands, only touch." "Only humans," Lisa said. "At this moment in galactic history, yes, only humans." The sensors suddenly flashed with warning lights. Danny ran to check them, and his face went pale. "They're here, the combined fleet. They must have tracked our hyperspace signature." Jake looked at the screens showing the entrance to the system. Ships were pouring in, more than he could count. Warships formed attack formations. Cruisers spread out to cover possible escape routes, and in the center of them all, two massive vessels that could only be flagships. One carried the symbol of the Empire. The other bore the elegant curves of the Confederation. "Two fleets," Karen said, "working together. That hasn't happened in 1,000 years." A communication signal came through, two voices speaking in turn. "Human Jake," said Commander Sorrel, his tone filled with barely controlled rage. "You have led us to the greatest treasure in the galaxy. For that I thank you. Now surrender and your death will be quick." "Mister," said a smoother voice, one that Jake recognized as belonging to I am Ambassador. The Confederation urges you to consider reason. Architect technology is too powerful for any single species to control. Surrender the shipyard to a neutral council, and we can discuss terms that benefit everyone." Jake listened to both of them, the threat and the diplomacy, and understood that neither offered any real choice. They would kill him and take everything. They would imprison him and take everything slightly more politely. The result would be the same. "Vigil," Jake said quietly, "can I activate the awakening protocol from here?" "Yes, but the ships will not move without builders aboard. They cannot be controlled remotely." Jake looked at his crew. Lisa, who had followed him into disaster after disaster without complaint. Danny, who saw machines the way others saw music. Karen, who had spent her life chasing secrets and finally found the biggest one of all. "We need volunteers," Jake said. "Every human who boards a ship becomes a target. Every one of us who does this is choosing to stand against two galactic powers at once." Lisa stepped forward first. "I didn't come this far to watch from the sidelines." Danny nodded, his young face set with determination. Those engines. I have to fly one of them. I have to know what it feels like. Karen hesitated, then smiled grimly. I'm too old for this, but I'm also too old to care about playing it safe. Jake turned to the control panel and placed his hands on its surface. The station responded to his touch, lights flickering to life across every screen. He could feel the sleeping ship stirring, sensing his presence, waiting for his command. This is Jake, he broadcast on all frequencies. I'm speaking to Commander Sorrel, Ambassador, and everyone else listening. The architects left this fleet for us, not for the strongest species, not for the most advanced, for the ones who still remember how to build with their own hands. He paused, feeling this presence in his mind, feeling the fleet beginning to wake around him. Humans are small, we're new, we're what everyone else calls primitive, but we're also the only ones who can do this. He activated the awakening protocol. Light flooded the shipyard. One by one, the dormant vessels came alive, their hulls glowing with power that had waited millions of years to be released. The central station hummed with energy as systems activated across every ship simultaneously. Lisa, Danny, Karen, go find ships, wake them up. They ran. Each of them boarded a different vessel, and Jake watched through the station's sensors as they found pilot chairs and engaged controls. Lisa chose a sleek warship that moved like thought made solid. Danny found a massive construction vessel whose engines sang with harmonics he could feel through the hull. Karen took a command carrier, a ship designed to coordinate entire fleets. And in the darkness of space, the combined alien fleet watched in horror as 4 human-controlled architect vessels rose to face them. This is impossible, Commander Sorrel said, his voice breaking. You cannot operate those ships. No one can. We can, Jake replied, and we're willing to prove it, but not through war. He broadcast his voice to both fleets at once. The architects didn't leave this power for conquest. They left it for building, for creating, for species who hadn't forgotten how to make things with their own hands. Humanity qualifies. Maybe we're the only ones who do right now, but that doesn't mean we want to rule you. It means we want to work alongside you. Ambassador's voice came through, hesitant but curious. What are you proposing? Partnership. The architects built the hyperspace routes that connect our galaxy. Those routes are breaking down. Your scientists know it. Eventually, travel between systems will become impossible. Civilizations will be cut off from each other. Everything will fall apart. Jake pulled up data that Vigil had provided, transmitting it to both fleets. This fleet can repair the routes. It can build new ones. It can do things that no current technology can match, but only if humans operate it. We're offering to use this power for everyone, to fix what's broken, to build what's needed, not as rulers, as workers, as builders. Silence stretched across the communication channels. The warships held their positions, weapons still powered but not firing. The cruisers waited, their crews debating among themselves. Then slowly, Commander Sorrel spoke. You expect us to trust you, to believe that you won't use this power against us. I expect you to watch us, Jake replied. Judge us by our actions. If we break our word, if we use these ships for conquest, then unite against us. With the whole galaxy working together, you could probably stop us eventually. But give us a chance to prove what we're really about. More silence, then Ambassador's voice softer now. The architects chose you. Perhaps there is wisdom in that choice that we cannot yet see. The cruisers began to power down their weapons. After a long moment, the followed. Jake stood on the bridge of the central station, watching the 2 fleets that had come to destroy him slowly transform into something else. Not allies, not yet, but perhaps not enemies either. Lisa's voice came through, filled with wonder. Jake, you should see what this ship can do. It's like flying with your whole body. Same here, Danny said. I never want to fly anything else. Karen laughed, a sound Jake had never heard from her before. "I spent my whole career chasing architect secrets. I never imagined I'd be living inside one." Jake looked out at the fleet of ancient ships, now humming with life, waiting for human hands to guide them. The galaxy had changed today. Humanity had changed, not through weapons or wars, but through something simpler. They had remembered how to build. And in a universe that had forgotten that skill, that single advantage was worth more than all the armies in existence. The rose from the station, joining its sisters in the darkness of space. Jake sat in the pilot's chair, hands on the controls, and smiled. The real work was just beginning.